Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dojo Live this Wednesday, January 18th, 2023. My name is Kim Landis, and joining me as co-host once again is America Guerrero.
Hello, everybody. Happy for being here. This feels like a panel, not a show.
I know! It's always fun when we have two guests, and today's two guests are none other than Craig McLaughlin and Mark Ryan, CEO and CAO, respectively, of Finalytics.ai. Thank you for joining us, Craig, Mark.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, all the way from San Mateo, California. So here we are. We're going to talk all about personalization today, and specifically personalization in digital banking. But before we get to the topic of conversation, we really would love to learn more about you as individuals, as your relationship, as team members here of the same company, and of course at Finalytics. So let's start a little bit with Craig, if you could. What's your story, your passion, and what's led up to where you are today?
So I've always been passionate about the ability to use digital to drive better business outcomes for all kinds of companies, whether that's a healthcare company, financial services company, or high technology company. The challenge for me was always thinking about how could you bring together art and technology to solve big, meaty business problems, and how could you do it in a way that you achieve better results than an alternative approach? And so that's kind of where I got my start. I started actually originally working at Sony in research and development, looking at new technologies and how they could be applied to the business at Sony. Then ended up meeting Mark at my next stop at a company called US Web, which was just a very early innovator in digital consulting. And then after working together in their content management system practice for a period of time, we thought, hey, we can probably just go do this on our own. And that's what we did. We left to go and do that work. And it was during the dot-com boom, and that period of time, it was like everything was growing, and it was just, things were crazy nuts. And then very, very quickly, things changed in the dot-com bust. So it was, we learned very, very the hard way in terms of the ups and downs of business cycles and how to manage through that. And we've been working together ever since.
Wow, and that I think will make a really great topic of conversation for later on in the show when we get to our words of wisdom and company culture that you've built throughout the years. But before we do that, of course, Mark, I know Craig's side of the story. What's your side?
Yeah, I've my entire career I've worked in tech, similar to Craig. I started out working actually in semiconductor. I worked on programming robotic arms in computer chip manufacturing plants. Doing the software side of that. And at one point, this was sort of in the middle of the dot-com boom, so my friends prompted me to go and look at sort of web programming type jobs. And like Craig mentioned, I got a job at the largest web consultancy, US Web, and I think Craig and I got hired like within a day of each other, and we ended up sitting next to each other, and we just worked crazy hours. I mean, it was routinely 100-hour work weeks, and he and I would go drinking afterwards and talk about things that we wanted to do together. And then we basically, like Craig said, one day we realized, like, hey, there's a great opportunity for us to go out, and we did. I think, we've always had a big passion for looking at the analytics behind digital experiences. Looking at the difference between what people think is going to happen, what they want to have happen, and what is actually happening, and how you use those analytics to make the experiences better. And it's just within the last year or two that we've looked at it. There's like a fantastic opportunity in the financial space. And so we've been working very hard on capitalizing on that.
Yeah, I think that was actually one of my questions about the specifics of the space in which you're in. But before we talk about those specifics, talk about Finalytics, exactly who you are, the problem that you're solving. Either one. Who wants to raise their hand? Craig, go for it.
Who has the best answer?
So I can kick us. So why don't I kick us off, then I'll hand to Mark to add on to that. So Mark mentioned very early on we were interested in the idea of how could we use data and analytics to generate better results for clients and do that in a way where we integrated beautiful art and innovative digital experiences, but doing all that with an eye towards a business outcome. And in working with a range of different companies throughout North America, and as we talked about earlier, Kim, in Mexico too, with Cemex, what we found was that there were tools that were built for generalist organizations that weren't as well suited to individual industries. And the more that we focus solely on financial services and that business use case, the clearer it became inside of banking that there was a need for a tool that could ingest data to output an experience that was personalized around the goals of an individual user. And financial services is a little bit unique, right? There's not too many categories where an institution has the wealth of data on a consumer as does financial services, right? You're seeing every transaction that a user is doing. You're able to more deeply understand them in a lot of ways in a more intimate way than their family knows them, right? Because they know exactly where every dollar goes. And so that data largely is untapped. And if you bring in kind of off-the-shelf tools that are generalist tool sets for multiple industries, they don't really take that into account. And so we saw larger community financial institutions wanting to get that right and struggling to find tool sets to be able to do that. We saw them also struggle to implement those solutions. So when it came to having the idea, getting senior leadership to commit the funding to do those projects, which was a huge undertaking unto itself, we saw them really struggle to then, with that funding, to go and complete those engagements. And so there's always that old adage that over 80% of IT projects fail. These are projects that were really, kind of fit that model, right? Where it's really hard to get it right. So big disappointment, right? You've got organizations that are committed to solving the problem, have been funded appropriately to be able to do that, and then struggle when the ball ends up in their court to be able to get that right. And the more analysis we did into that, we said, well, why are these guys struggling with that? Well, why is this such a hard thing to do? Well, it's you're asking a financial institution to become a software company. Yeah. And it's really hard to be it's hard to ship code. It's hard to get all those things right. There are lots of best practices and methodologies that an organization needs to implement in order to be able to make that happen. And banks aren't really well suited for that. They tend to be siloed. They tend to be organizations where people have kind of their department or their area where they have complete autonomy, but to be able to work collectively inside the organization really hard. In order to get personalization right, you really have to have alignment across the organization. It's not just what technology needs to do. It's also what marketing and content and business strategy and all these things need to come together. So hard to get right. So we realized, how can you make it easier for them? And what we thought was, instead of having these tools be something that an organization needs to go and deploy on-prem, how could we build a tool set that would enable them to be able to deploy it on a SaaS basis? And so bringing to bear all of the team that can be able to yield those experiences and to basically turn that on, and instead focus all of your energy on the cultural transformation bit. So helping an organization translate their business needs into then some strategies, and then showing up with the technology to be able to implement that. It's probably a long answer to maybe a much simpler question, but that's kind of how we ended up with this with the business.
No, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I mean, what can be more personal? Really, there's very few things that are more personal than our finances, right? Maybe our healthcare, fashion to a certain and perhaps lesser importance degree, but I think it's a way in which we express ourselves. But our money, I mean, it's where we expect personalization. And with all the technology that's out there, I think this banking is particularly a space where so many people are like, it shouldn't be this hard. Like everyone else can do it. Everywhere else I have this experience, and then somehow you're right. It seems that we struggle through more in the financial sector. Perfect. And I think, go ahead.
What's even interesting about that too is that all the consulting work that we did with financial services institutions, the focus for us was to, as good consultants, was to say, how do you uncover what the organization's offline value proposition is? And then how do you then manifest that in the digital experience, right? So we would do a lot of design thinking work, and we would go and sit with executives inside of financial institutions and ask them, hey, why do people bank here? What makes this place special? With the intent of understanding that secret sauce and finding a way to bring it to the digital experience. And we would do the same thing with customers. We would say, well, you could bank anywhere. Why do you bank here? And there's kind of these three different tranches. There's a fintech use case, there's a kind of mega bank use case, and then there's community financial use case. And if you look at the number of organizations that to do this, there's 10,000 community financial institutions in the United States, so pretty big total addressable market. And when you talk to those executives and customers and you say, why do you bank here? They all say the same thing. They say that they bank here because of service. Mm-hmm. And the problem is, the examples of service that they share are examples of in-person experiences. Yeah. And so when you go through a transformation like what banking is going through, where this is a service that's now delivered digitally, the only way to be able to bring that offline value proposition to the digital channel and manifest it is through personalization, by bringing that same kind of high-touch experience to those moments of truth in the digital experience, using data to be able to drive that. And yeah, Mark can talk to you more about how we bring that to life.
Let's do, but before we do that, I think what you're saying, my personal experience, and I mentioned this on dojolive before, over about 2 years ago now, a little less, my mom passed away, and I've received some life insurance checks. Now, living in Mexico with a check coming from the United States, I'm unable to actually cash that check here because it's in dollars versus pesos. Unfortunately, I personally do not have a bank account in the United States. So there's this option of like, I can, go to the United States, use some check cashing service and pay some astronomical fee to get my money. Or I was able to go with my sister to her credit union in small town USA, and without any problem, sign the check over to her. She cashes it and she gives me my money, right? So is that an example of this type of in-person experience that we're hoping to be able to accomplish in the digital world?
Yeah, I think that's a great, yes, absolutely. I think that's that same kind of moment, that moment of truth, right? Where you walk into a branch and you have a problem and you're either confronted with all the legalese and why you can't do that or why that's not an option, as opposed to a great example is a credit union that really cares about the individual and says,
and her, like, we know you, we trust you. You've been here for years and years. You're not going anywhere. You say she's your sister and she's got the IDs and everything.
We trust you. Yeah, we'll do a transaction for you. It's personal, right? It's a high touch experience. And those are always the examples when we talk to executives and we say, well, what makes you special? They'll go through and they'll say, this one time somebody came in with their sister who had a check and because of a life insurance payout, but she couldn't cash it. Here's how we navigated through that, and we created a delightful experience for that individual. The big question is, how do you do that digitally? How do you continue to do that? And that's what we're in the midst of building for our customers, which is enabling them to deliver that high touch experience.
Very cool. And I think we can move into the more technical side of this with you, Mark, and of course the chosen, here we are, 13 minutes in, but this chosen beautiful topic that we've already touched on quite well, which is
beyond personalization, AI and digital banking, creating segment of one digital experiences for customers. So you already told us why this topic is important, but how? I'm curious how you combine this element of consulting and the platform that you have, because there are a lot of elements to consider when you are supporting a company. So please share with us.
Mark? And I think, as Craig mentioned, that the financial industry is amazing in the amount of data that they have, and they've actually been sitting on for quite a long time. A typical consumer logs into their online banking application at least once a week, meaning, we're interacting with our financial institutions more often than we're interacting with our extended family. We're spending more time with our financial institutions than we are planning our diet. It's a big part of our lives, and they have data on all of these transactions. But when you look at the 15,000 plus financial institutions there are in the world, they haven't really been doing much with that data over the last decade. And we're just now at this interesting point in the industry. Kim, you'd mentioned going into the branch. Well, we know fewer and fewer people are going into branches. The amount of branches out there are going down, down, down. And so they really are in a point, these 15,000 financial institutions, they're at a point where they have to start offering personal services online. Most industries, they struggle to get the data to drive the personalization. The financial industry already has it. They're just not doing much with it. And so we set out to make a platform that minimizes the amount of obstacles that a financial institution has in offering personalized services and helps them to offer personalization in a variety of different ways. Because a lot of financial institutions are offering personalization in maybe email marketing, but that's it. We've provided a platform that allows them to do email personalization across multiple industries, and not just personalization around sales. We really want these institutions to use personalization to drive better customer and member service and loyalty. We want people to use personalization to drive appreciation of the customer.
I think that's really cool. So in terms of, the sales side, which you already mentioned, but let's talk about this segment of one digital experience. I think with this philosophy that when your customer is treated right, it's going to inevitably lead to the sales, right? This chicken and the egg thing. But let's start with the customer. So what are these types of digital experiences, for example, maybe some use cases that you can provide with Finalytics, that how this plays out? Maybe, and also where this information is gathered from. For example, right now, I'm actually hoping to buy a home. And so I'm going on Facebook Marketplace a lot, pretty much every morning, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I'm with the spoon in one hand and my cell phone in the other, just seeing what's out there. This data is somewhere. And so wouldn't it be in my best interest and even a bank's best interest to start being hey, these are the types of homes that she's interested in. This seems to be the price point, competitive interest rates or payment plans or whatever. Is this being able to be presented to me without me even searching for it actively? Is that an example?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you brought up the idea of, buying a home. Because personalization in the digital channel has existed for a long time. I think we can all remember, our first time on Amazon when it said, hey, people that like this product also like these products. And so it's been out there. But when people are looking for financial products, they're using different behaviors. People don't use the same behaviors that when they're buying shoes as they do when they're buying a mortgage. And I think a lot of the reason is that making a bad decision when you're buying shoes doesn't have a negative impact on your life. But in your journey, when you're searching for a mortgage, making the right decision on a mortgage has a big impact on your life. And so they're more deliberate and they're spending more time. And so as you're going out there looking at these different financial products, they should be looking at your buying behaviors. What size of home are you buying? What type? Are you looking for rates? Are you looking at fees? Are you looking for high touch, high service? And once they see what your interests are, they should start catering that experience to you to provide the type of service that you want so that they can help you get what you need. And that's a big area of focus for us is learning the types of behaviors, how the visitor wants to communicate with the institution, what their points of interest are, and then dynamically changing the experience to make it a better service experience for them.
For sure. And I think the flip side of this personalization, how much of this is what I don't even know that I want? Is that something too that you're able to kind of draw out of the data that you're collecting in terms of, I think we talked about the user experience, this interviewing, right, with the board members of the institutions as well as their customers. And I think this sometimes what we say and what we do don't necessarily, match in our actual habits, but is showing me what I can benefit from or showing me what I didn't even know existed a part of personalization, or is that just spammy? How does that work?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, talking about the data points of making a prediction on what a visitor is interested in, in the scenario that you came up of, you're searching for a home, definitely there's somewhere back there's credit scoring type organizations or banks that are looking at data points such as your age, the amount of money that you're depositing into your bank accounts, how much you're spending. They're looking for different life cycle cues, like, is this person married? Do they have kids? All these things that change the propensity of them looking for an auto loan or looking for a new credit card or looking for a mortgage. And then, of course, with those data points, we start to understand the attributes that are important to them. For example, first-time homebuyers are a lot more interested in, can they even get approved? How much can they get approved for? How much will their mortgage payment be? Whereas if I see a data point of, somebody has a lot of certificates of deposit or bonds or things that older, more financially stable type people have, we know for them, they're looking for low rates. They're looking for low fees. They're not concerned on whether or not they're going to get approved. They know they're going to get approved. And on those journeys, you said, what is it that I don't know that I should know? Absolutely. That's when we want to start to pepper in financial education. Is this person a first-time homebuyer? Then we want to start to provide them content and tools to understand the benefits of renting versus buying, and things like that of, just how much home should you buy for it to fit within your budget, but you're still getting the benefits of, long-term real estate investments and things like that. So yeah, absolutely. It's making the buyer aware of how to make a smart decision and how a particular financial institution is going to help them make that smart decision.
I'm curious about this journey. You said that you have clients in Mexico, right? I'm correct? Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Oh, okay.
Consulting, I think, with their previous venture together, right?
Oh, okay. Because I wanted to ask you, how was the journey of recollecting this data in the United States, comparing with Mexico? But are you planning to do that in the future?
We are down the road. Right now, we're focused exclusively on North America.
Okay, Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So who are your users? Like you mentioned, are you focused in all three of those verticals, the fintech, the mega banks, and the kind of credit union, community bank areas? Do you have one preference over the other? Or what was that business journey like for you in terms of where you started to where you are today?
We knew there were a handful of clients that we worked with on a consulting basis that we knew would be a great fit. And so those were the original use cases. And they tend to be the larger credit unions and the larger community financial institutions. So kind of those types of organizations is our focus in terms of initial launch. And as we continue to grow, we'll grow into other kind of sized and types of organizations as well.
Cool. So who's your current user? I mean, the end beneficiary from this, of course, is the customer, the bankers. Is that the word? What are we called? in creating that segment of one digital experience. But who's interested in using Finalytics, or who are you actually interested in having use it? Like, is this something clearly from a business standpoint you'd probably like to see everywhere? But is there like some alignment in terms of like who you're specifically searching for, cultural alignments, purpose? Like, who's your, ICP in that sense?
Yeah, so we're huge fans of credit unions, right? I mean, it's a not-for-profit organization that puts the customer, the member, at the very center of everything they do. So it totally aligns with our thinking in terms of what's important. So we really like that. Now, with that said, are we limited to credit unions? No, but it's our primary use case. Secondarily, I think your other question is like, who is the customer maybe inside the organization?
Yeah, like who's using it? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because it's changing. Originally, it was marketing, right? Marketing was the one who said, we want to be able to connect with our audiences in relevant ways. And so there was a lot of work, years ago on journey maps and personas. And so that was really working with some predefined understanding of who a user is. And then it was then creating journeys around how that individual user might navigate through the experience. The problem is you had to create content that was somewhat static, right? I mean, it was you could create content that was relevant to maybe a first-time home buyer and separate from maybe somebody that was in saving for their kids' college. And so the hard part about that is when you include that kind of financial education content, it tends to be in a siloed area of a digital experience where people don't really go. So like to go and say, hey, look, now I'm going to go navigate to the experience around saving for college or around home buying is hard. But if you can detect that behavior, if you can say, hey, no, I see a user is going through and looking at the home, finance calculator, and they're logging into their account. Well, now that's a clue. Like now I can include some other, kind of trailhead information at the beginning of an experience focused on that individual user behavior. So it kind of, in a way, takes personas and makes them less relevant, or at least it makes maybe the output of understanding a persona more relevant in terms of having dynamic content associated with that user and experience. Now, inside the organization, the people that use that content is changing and shifting. It used to be marketing, but now a lot of times it's business units. So there's the CFO who's saying, it's really important that we generate deposits right now. So how can we go and make sure that we're targeting the right users or the right content, and we're promoting the right information. And a good example of that is a lot of times if you don't want to cannibalize existing business. So if you've got an existing customer that has a CD with you at a rate that they just keep renewing, well, sending them a promo, maybe isn't the best thing. Maybe instead it's something different. And how can you then use insights on user behavior inside their accounts to inform what you're presenting? So can you go to a user and say, hey, it looks like I can see that you have X amount of dollars sitting in your savings account, that if you moved it into a CD, you'd make Y dollars more. Can you present that information dynamically to that user? So it's kind of shifting a little bit the opportunities for using data in smart ways and presenting to the consumer. It's also bringing in a wider swath of stakeholders from inside the banks and credit unions to have a seat at the table and ask for more relevant content for their particular target audiences.
And that's super smart too, this mention of cannibalism and going back to, because it's the opposite of personalization, right? If you're sending me information that is not relevant to me, and it's annoying, and it can, like you said, in that sense, backfire and potentially have a negative consequence that I wouldn't want, or trying to prevent. Wow, it makes a lot of sense. In terms of, I think we're going to shift to company culture here in just a moment. But before we do, Mark, I wanted to talk to you about the usability components. I mean, we talk about data and it sounds scary, right? It sounds hard. It sounds so technical. And if you've got, people in the business units or marketers looking at this and the technical side, how have you been able to make this easy for those people to utilize and access this data in a non-scary way? Is this like a no-code type approach, or what does this look like in terms of tech?
Well, first of all, I think data is fun. I think that I understand.
As a chief analytics officer, you would. I guess you're like, what? You should, and if you don't, you're in the wrong business.
Yeah. I'm sure it can be intimidating sometimes, but for the most part, I think it's a lot of fun. When we let the machine learning go and run through on the analytics on a particular bank or credit union's website, it comes back with all these unintuitive segments that we never thought of before. There was an institution in the Midwest that came back with this segment of women on Apple devices in Minneapolis on Monday mornings are 3.2 times more likely to convert with a checking account compared to other products. Who would think of that kind of persona? And so, I look at that stuff and I really, I enjoy it. And that one doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but sometimes the algorithm comes back with these personas that, at first we kind of think that's weird, but after we think about it, it makes sense. One that I've always been fascinated with is, and this is pretty consistent across financial institutions, a visitor to a website that's using the Firefox browser and that are on an Android device is much more interested in a credit card or an auto loan than other types of products. A visitor that comes to a site on a Windows laptop and they're using an outdated Edge browser is much more interested in an IRA or a certificate deposit or some kind of savings account. And at first we look back and that's kind of weird. But then when you think about it, somebody that's using Firefox on an Android device is young.
Yep.
Someone that's using Bing on an old an old version of Edge and they're using Bing is probably older. And so I think the math is cool, and then it tells us these things that sometimes we wouldn't have any idea, and sometimes it tells us these things that are, after we think about it, are intuitive. And so I absolutely love that part of diving in and kind of letting the machine learning. In terms of making it approachable, one thing that we've definitely seen is personalization at scale is really difficult. And I'll give you a really simple example of, think of as you're going around and you're looking at financial products, and you're looking at the bank's website. A very common design approach is they have a big marquee banner on their homepage. That's super common in the industry right now. And it's actually very difficult for them to come up with that one marquee banner, because they have to get the compliance team to review it. They have to get the branding team to review it. They have to get all the product people to agree on what product to put on that. With our platform, the machine learning is identifying all these different segments. And not only is it deciding, what products or service to promote to them, but it's also thinking of how, to promote it. So for example, if the machine learning comes back and says, hey, we should be promoting an auto loan to this person, it's also looking to see, is this person part of a young family? If it is, we want to show a young family enjoying the car. Or is this person a college student? If so, we want to show a college student driving their new car. And so if you think about personalization at that level, and like Craig said, segment of one, now all of a sudden for these banks, they potentially have 100 different marquee banners that can be served up on their homepage. So in terms of making it approachable, we've built the platform so that the machine learning is automating a lot of steps that used to be manual in personalization, so that the marketing team is focusing on what they really enjoy and coming up with very creative and persuasive content and imagery, and not really being worried about, well, who do I show this to? The machine learning is telling us that. The machine learning is telling us how to do it in the most effective way. It allows these marketers to do what they enjoy most.
100 different options, and not having to be afraid if it's going to be less effective or more effective. Like this certainty. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. We've come to the end of our show today. I think we've got one quick question that America does want to ask specific to Finalytics.
Should we ask about culture or about word of wisdom, Kim? You decide.
I don't know. What do you guys want to talk to? How have you crashed and burned and risen from the ashes, Craig and Mark? What are your words of wisdom throughout all of your years for individuals like you who think we have a good idea, the time is right, let's do this?
I really think culture is life or death. I mean, I really just think you have to be, you have to treat it with all due respect, because if you don't, it comes back to bite you. It is all about people. It's all about taking care of your people and making sure that people feel like they're getting what they need. It's about asking the tough questions, probing. It's about being having integrity and being direct and honest and showing up. And at the end of the day, the relationships that you have with the people that you work with are everything that's going to enable you to be able to get to your goals. And if you try and get around it, or if you shirk a responsibility, it always comes. You can let it go by for a little while, but it always comes back to bite you. Every single time it comes back to bite you. But Mark, what do you think about that?
To me, something that I've learned over and over again is, if you're working on a product that you truly believe adds value, to the world and to the market, it just brings a certain amount of passion to work every day. And so you mentioned the crash and burn. If you truly believe in what you're working on is going to help the world and help an industry, then the little wrecks that come along the way, they don't stunt you, they don't slow you down. You just keep going through it because you believe that you're doing something. And that's something that Craig and I bring every day, is a passion that we can make the financial industry. We can take it from a place today where it's kind of perceived as maybe boring and bland to something that's exciting and personalized and helps people live better lives.
Love it. Well, thank you very much, Mark and Craig, for joining us today. All of you financial institutions out there looking for a great tool for you, be sure to check out Finalytics. And then, of course, join us this week. We've got 2 more shows this week on Dojo Live, which are...
Yes, tomorrow we're going to have a show with Montana Butch, founder and CEO of the company Spotivity. The topic is going to be about spot your activity, develop your passion, and achieve your goals. How does data and creative thinking superpower team decision making? So don't miss the show tomorrow at 10 a.m. Pacific. And I don't have the name of Friday's show. That is going
Yeah,
to
I
be
think
the
it's Beyond
metaverse.
Imagination, again, with Ramin and Dianela, all about the metaverse. It's talking about, I think, the advertising component and the, no, it's pop culture. It's going to be pop culture in the metaverse, also on Friday at 10 o'clock.
Very cool.
All right, cool. Thank you, Craig. Mark, again, hang on just a minute as we go off air. But before we do that, I want to tell our viewers, stay safe, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you.